the way systems operate, let's say in China, are completely different. The way they shape the mindsets of their citizens is a lot more hands-on, and therefore completely different, let's say, to what happens in India or to the Middle East or even in Iraq.
India has a lot of success in the education field.
Not for all of its citizens. There's a big divide in class. So
that's true.
If you're not part of there's a lot of illiteracy, there's a lot of famine, a lot of poverty, which then prevents the education system disseminating. But then you look at other parts of the Middle East, and there are, through successful education systems, for example, Qatar, where the World Cup was held, the UAE for a long time now has been creating and producing individuals in its own country of very, very high caliber to now be competing in various fields that America has been dominating. And when I say compete, I don't mean with the aim to take over American prowess, but to be competing basically is a big place to be in itself. But these are countries that have great education systems. What do I mean by great education system? Great primary and secondary education systems, and also a government-backed system that sends their students to the highest-ranking universities in the world. Have you ever met somebody from the UAE or from Qatar or from Kuwait, okay, all excellent parts of the world with great education systems that are past university age and they're living here? No. Or in Europe? Never, okay? Almost impossible. Why? Because their country gives them all of the provisions that they need to do that. China's a lot more strict in the sense that it is very, very serving to elite groups, but ordinary citizens too can mobilize and function, albeit in a system that we wouldn't agree with, because they have their own surveillance state and socially controlled system. But to see any country, which I think you brought a question, match America's level of self-belief on an individual level. And I'd ask American students in all my classes, how do you feel when you're in London? Like, do you feel, because when you go on holiday, for example, you always hear that arrogance from an American. In New York, I'm from New York. And when they say where they're from, they don't even say I'm American. They just say their city and state, and there's an expectation for that other person to know. Whereas if that was a person from China or a person from somewhere in the Middle East, they wouldn't have that confidence. They'd say the country, and if they were lucky enough that the person even knew where that was, then they'd say, they might have a follow-up question. But no, some education systems, they start you very, very early on, and you kind of have that sense of confidence linked to your race, linked to your identity, linked to your country, and it's nationalism with a major undercurrent of race playing a big part as well. To the point where, as I said, when you get Americans that come to London and travel to Europe and they see the rest of the world, they have they actually realise that there's a whole outside of the bubble that they haven't seen or experienced.
Yeah, I suppose it would be easy for Americans to be in a bubble considering how big America is. But if I had to ask you, name the top 5 most famous people, you'd probably, all 5 of them might be American, wouldn't they? So America, for good or for worse, has really played an impactful role in society in good ways and in bad ways. So, I don't know, if I mentioned serial killers, you'd probably say Ted Bundy, and he's American. If I mentioned great people who've made change, you might say Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali. It's always been the centre of the world. Now, I have a question for you as someone who's a lecturer in international relations. How is America dealing with the competition coming out of the Middle East, of the East, in places like China and India? And how is it trying to adapt itself or try keeping itself at number 1? Because the political landscape looks to me as if China, India, Russia, they're gunning for that top spot.
So under Trump, we saw a managed, aggressive policy that saw American influence and authority, simply put, decline in various parts of the world. So the Far East, the Middle East was a major area of retreat.
That trading war with China that they had.
Yep. Yeah, the trading war and that popularity waned there, even though America and China are very interdependent. But I think when you look at regional power globally for the US, Middle East being a key example, that's a big area of the world with important resources. When Biden came in, he was almost playing like second or third best to other regional and global powers in that regard. Then that kind of shows that America now is not just competing on the international stage because of certain things that have happened, but also the bigger kind of picture is that this neoliberal Anglo-American or American dominated model isn't as powerful, as workable as it was before. It's not as powerful now because you live in a multipolar world where you have Brazil, Russia, India, China. You've got all these different ideas of how the world should be, with sustainability now being a big challenge to the whole picture of what is success. Success is sleeping on a bed of dollars. Doesn't matter how you've got this bed of dollars or you've made all this money, but success is basically capital, big houses, mansions, MTV cribs. Our definitions of success have changed. The pandemic has also exacerbated some of these shifts to the point where we now have alternative powers that are kind of determining the way or alternative ways that the world should work and operate and could work and operate. For example, we no longer live in a world where it's just the American or the classic neoliberal way of life. There's other elements of society that we need to learn from urgently. Diaspora is a big part of it, but look at the other races, look at the other countries. This World Cup that just went, Qatar, this is probably the most underdocumented World Cup in terms of events outside of the actual football itself. Zero hate crimes, zero arrests. To have a World Cup where not a single England fan was arrested. God forbid if there were, they would have been all over the media. To have a system in place where there's representatives from various countries as workers on the street helping people get by, free SIM cards, international calls, free transport for people, all these kind of things, unheard of hospitality. And then you look at the UAE, this kind of zero crime mindset and mentality, and you compare it to the civilized world, or the so-called civilized world. And you could also say that, coming back to the whole diaspora argument, that we've overlooked the contributions of key pillars and members of our societies and what they could bring or how we could learn from them and their ways and where they've come from. But most importantly, we're now seeing a shift. Is this going to be the East's moment in the next, let's say, or in the rest of this century? For example, Qatar's just demonstrably ran probably the most successful World Cup on goals scored alone, the highest number of goals.
It's very
scored.
entertaining.
Yeah, very, very entertaining.
It will always be the World Cup that Messi won.
Yeah, exactly. And that alone was the pinnacle, right? Wherever Messi wins, nobody will forget that.
Yeah.
It was almost written in the stars, right? Kind of one element. Saudi Arabia's got its, you're an architect. I don't know how this
the
will
line.
pan out. Yeah, the line. They always say the architect is the kind of first base of the plan, but it's always the engineers that have to get everything right. But of course, if the architect is slightly messed up. So Saudi Arabia's moment. The UAE has already been doing great things. Their people believe that they are the best. They've got that mindset almost, but without the arrogance. The American great mindset, but with loads of humbleness and actually giving back to their regions. If you look at the pandemic, that's a big indication. And then you can compare that, how things are in Europe, cost of
we're
inflation.
going through it.
Yeah, America, similar. We may see a turn of the tide because the models that we've been given to be told that they're the best models have alienated. You said, how do other people feel in other societies? That inadequacy or inferiority complex that comes with this powerful system that tells you that, you all need to fit a particular order, which overlooks key contributions from an Iraqi Kurd, from a South African, from a let's say, person from China in that very, very system. Because our systems, if you think about it, they don't really consolidate the people we have. It's more a case of the people have to consolidate whatever is needed in that particular political system and then serve it. That might be takeaways, that might be cleaning services, that might be bus drivers, that might be, whatever's needed and whatever we can break into. But that complex, that lack of consolidation from the beginning has a detrimental effect for society's capabilities. So you're a kid and you, as a diaspora, never are made to fit in that particular country that you're in, far away from home. You never know your value. You never know your own history, and you're caught between where you're from and the culture at home, which if you have first generation migrant parents, they've already had a rupture. They've left their homeland. So they're kind of, when you have that rupture where you have to leave for political reason, insecurity, that never leaves you. You never feel secure. So you go home to that. You're in school, you're not really consolidated. That affects your trajectory into university education, where then you may only hang around with people that you think you have things in common with, i.e. people of the non-white race. And you see those groups and hurdles in universities. I mean, whoever's watching this can go to a university and look at how different groups come together. But for society, it's disastrous because contributions of key people of different backgrounds are missed out because the system doesn't have a way of capturing those or utilizing them. And you then create unequal societies